Hello there, everybody. This is Alan Feldman from the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today and watch this program. I think you're going to find this is going to be time well spent. We're going to be discussing a couple of issues that are truly of the utmost importance to just about everyone, certainly who lives in Laguna Woods, and pretty much everybody in this country who is at or near retirement age. We're going to be talking about Social Security, Medicare, and the Affordable Care Act. Now, Social Security is probably, so many people depend on Social Security as their primary, if not only, source of retirement income, and Medicare is our only, or sometimes only, and mostly primary source of medical insurance. So it's vitally important to us, and we know the Affordable Care Act has allowed millions of people to access affordable health care, which they weren't able to before. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about the issues surrounding us. Now, to help us with this, to talk about these and to the issues surrounding it, we are happy and privileged to be joined by two people who are both political activists and advocates. And so first I'm going to let them tell you what their particular organizations do, but I'm going to introduce them personally. First, on my right is Mr. John Bauman. Now, John probably looks familiar to a lot of you, and I'm going to tell you why, because John has had about a 50-year career in show business. We know John originally as Bowser from Sha-Na-Na, and now doing Bowser's doo-wop rock and roll parties. John, welcome. Thank you very much. Don't mistake John also. He's not here to sell us a reverse mortgage or
not at all.
Something
I'm
like that.
I'm not so sure about that
idea.
He is
a very knowledgeable, a very astute, very long-time advocate, not only for Social Security and Medicare, but for a lot of other issues. And we're also privileged to be joined by Stephen Martin. Stephen is from the Center for Popular Democracy. He also works for the Health Alliance California, I believe it is.
Health Access California.
Pardon me, Health Access of California. And he has an interesting story about the Affordable Care Act, a personal connection with the Affordable Care Act, which he hopefully will tell us about. And we're going to speak with John also about the Bowser aspects of his career during this conversation.
Why not?
Yeah, well, we're all interested. We all want to know. First, I'm just going to throw it out there. John, I'll start with you. You work for an organization called Social Security Works. You are chairman of the Social Security Works Political Action Committee.
Correct.
So let us know, what is that organization? What does it do?
So Social Security Works is a preeminent policy organization in DC and has been for many years. It was founded by Nancy Altman and Eric Kingston, and Nancy probably would be Social Security Commissioner right now under a different administration. The goals of Social Security Works are to protect and expand Social Security, protect and expand Medicare, protect and expand Medicaid, fight to lower drug prices, and also make sure that candidates all over the place and politicians stop using the word entitlements, the dirty word, and call these earned benefits, which is what they are. So what I have to say as Bowser in my intro is that on November 6th, a lot of candidates who will fight to protect and expand Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and lower drug prices have got to be doing this. Because that's how Bowser would do it.
We're gonna talk about some candidates in a minute. And Stephen, to tell us about the organization, the Center for Popular Democracy.
So I volunteer my time between a couple of different organizations, one being the Center for Popular Democracy, another is Health Access California. I'm not formally with them, but I do from time to time assist when they have rallies. Mm-hmm. But I go out to help defend the Affordable Care Act. It's very important to me, as well as millions of people in the country and thousands of people in Orange County. It expanded coverage for about 30 million people in this country, and it's important for so many reasons that have so many different caveats to why we should be protecting it.
Right. Well, I'm going to preface my next question by saying why I'm going to ask it, because when I ask it, everybody goes, everybody knows that, but I don't think everybody does. I think there's a disconnect between all of these programs and what they really are and what they really do. And why I think that is, I've seen surveys and studies, I'm sure you guys have too, of people who receive Medicare or benefits under the ACA or veterans benefits. And invariably, when people are queried, when they're surveyed, more than 50% when asked the question, do you receive government benefits, say no, they don't. So I think that's where the disconnect is, and I think some of it is manufactured and some of it is real. So very basic question. Stephen, we'll start with you this time. The Affordable Care Act, exactly, or in your best words, what is the Affordable Care Act?
Well, the Affordable Care Act for me is a piece of legislation that allows me to continuously have access to the kinds of medications that I need to survive. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of leukemia, and the medication that I require every single day is about $145,000. And when I got it, I was in the prime of my life and I don't have that kind of money.
Right.
And the Affordable Care Act lowers the cost with subsidies in California so that I can have access to the kinds of medications and facilities that I need treatment in.
Yeah, so basically, it gives people the opportunity to access affordable health care.
It gives people affordable health care who are maybe not on the right side of the economy at that time.
That's right. And John, the same question for you. There's so much misinformation about all of these things. What's Social Security? What's Medicare? Everybody thinks they know, but...
Social Security and Medicare are the two most successful social programs in the entire history of the United States. Before Social Security was passed in 1935, over 50% of American seniors lived below the poverty line. And still, before Medicare was passed in 1965, over 35% of American seniors lived in poverty. So the current poverty rate among seniors is about 8.7%. One thing that people don't understand, which is the technical answer to your question, is that they are insurance programs, and this is a very important distinction. These are insurance programs, OASDI, old age, right? Survivor, disability, insurance. That's really what this is about. They're insurance programs against wage loss for various reasons. Disability, old age, the loss of the earnings of a spouse, survivor benefits, or the earnings of a parent. So that's really what it's about. And Stephen and I have done a couple of events together because everything, does all get mixed together these days pretty quickly.
That's right.
So that we did something we called the Hands Off Medicare and Medicaid Tour in the first year of this administration, in which they were trying to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And our goal was to find 3 Republican senators who were going to vote against any bill that cut Medicare or Medicaid, any health care bill that cut Medicare or Medicaid. And blissfully, at the end of the day, because John McCain came through, and those 3 Republican senators were there by the skin of our teeth. But it's a constant, ongoing fight.
Yeah, it absolutely it is. And another issue, another aspect of it, I think, in both programs that people are misinformed about or uninformed about is the financing for these programs. And we'll get into the alleged problems with Social Security in a minute, but tell us, for Social Security and Medicaid, how are they financed?
So payroll taxes, people pay some people pay 6.2% of their income in payroll tax, right? And it's matched by the employer. I say some people because as people are more quickly finding out, we've spread the word about the cap on Social Security benefits, which is this year $128,400. And what that means is that if you make $128,400 or less, you really do pay 6.2%. But if you stop paying at $128,400, so let's say you're a Koch brother or Mitt Romney when he was running for president and made $22 million that year, you stopped at $128,400, so therefore you probably paid 0.000000001% of your income. And there's a lot of question as to, in America, as people are becoming more and more aware of this, the cap has always been there. It was part of the original bill because it was part of what was needed to be done to get Social Security passed in the first place. But it certainly seems sort of patently unfair and it's something that probably has to be dealt with in the future.
Yeah, that Social Security, in essence, it has its own dedicated stream, its own tax and dedicated stream. So when
Correct. It's not on the federal budget.
That's right.
Which is,
So when,
these viral emails, I don't know if you're going to bring this
Yeah.
up, but it's very important because the real source of misinformation are viral emails, Facebook, things that say, oh, the Social Security Trust Fund has been raided. Right. False. The Social Security Trust Fund cannot actually be raided.
Right.
The trust funds are in Treasury bills, and they are separate from the federal budget. So also, if anybody tells you, that when politicians say that, the deficit's being created by Social Security, that's entirely a false statement.
Right, exactly. And how about the Affordable Care Act?
The Affordable Care Act is very different in many different states. It's done through a wide variety of different financial apparatuses through the tax system.
Right.
In California, I get a subsidy, and then at the end of the year when I do my taxes, I pay that subsidy back with what my taxes would have been.
So your subsidy is actually considered income.
I believe that would be correct.
You have to pay taxes on
Yeah.
it, yeah. So you're getting. So it's not the. So I found that when discussing the Affordable Care Act, especially in 2009, 2010, people were literally under the impression that the Affordable Care Act meant they were going to raise my taxes, the good, hardworking person. They were going to raise my taxes so that other people who didn't want to work would get medical care for free. And that's just a misunderstanding.
Misleading.
Right, misleading to say the least, and people didn't bother to correct it because it served their particular.
What's happening right now,
interest.
of course, going into this next election cycle, just be forewarned, is that premiums are going through the roof because of the repeal of the
mandate.
what we call the Trump tax scam, the repeal of the mandate included in the Trump tax scam. And Democrats are going to run very hard on this issue of that maneuver costing people a lot of money in their health insurance.
Yeah, let's stay on that topic for just a minute, because I actually just read something this morning in the newspaper about how the people in Congress, people in the administration, the opponents of the Affordable Care Act, they couldn't kill it. So the term was, he's let the termites loose on it, trying to chew it away from the bottom.
Kneecap it, disable it.
Make it anemic.
Right, and that's what people are talking about is people don't know, a lot of people don't know that the individual mandate was done away with in the tax bill that was recently passed. And some people feel that that's really was the whole thing, was to reduce taxes on the upper income people. So let's talk about the threats, the alleged threats to these programs. We certainly hear about it in Social Security all the time, Social Security and Medicare. What you were talking about, it's going broke. We can no longer sustain it. There's too many people like myself, retired people, collecting Social Security and Medicare. So what do you say to that when people talk about that?
Well, the number one thing that I have to say about the threats to Social Security and Medicare is that we're not going to have Speaker Ryan to kick around anymore.
That's right.
And, we might as well just celebrate that here for a minute, because this guy has spent his entire life with the Ayn Rand book, under his pillow, and he goes to bed at night. This is not that book. This is Social Security Works by Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson. But when he was trying to figure out any which way he could do away with these programs, despite the fact that he was, as a young person,
that's right,
benefited and got survivor's benefits after the passing of his dad, I believe it was,
right,
and absolutely personally benefited from this program. So even though Speaker Ryan, we won't have him to kick around anymore, they're going to come up with various different ways to threaten the programs. As you know, there was a tremendous threat on Social Security during the Bush administration.
That's correct, yeah.
An attempt to privatize. They haven't come up with clever new ways. They're always worming around trying to figure out clever new ways to get at these programs. And one thing that people have to be aware of is that all kinds of things are just cuts. Don't let them get packaged in some fancy way. They're, chain CPI, which has been talked about lately. It's just a cut. Raising the retirement age, it's just a cut. These are just cuts. It's very simple to understand. And the American people, and it doesn't change much whether it's a red state, a blue state, or a purple state? This is amazing. You brought it up before, about people not even knowing their government programs.
Right.
It reminded me of, remember in the Tea Party rallies when people were walking around with signs saying, keep the government's hands off my Medicare.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not very smart because Medicare is a government program, but
Working really well.
but the underlying reality of this, the underlying truth, is that that person holding that sign, what they're saying is, I like my Medicare,
That's
don't
right.
touch it.
That's right. That's right.
So we've done extensive polling, and frankly, Arkansas doesn't poll much differently from New Jersey with regard to how much people like their Social Security, their Medicare. Medicaid is being better understood now as, very importantly, 67% of long-term care in America
That's
is
right.
paid for by Medicaid. And we are popularizing this idea, but people are catching on that, wait a second, that affects me, that affects my family, that's my mother, my father, my sister, me,
it.
my brother,
That's it.
Yeah.
I think that's an important issue, especially here at Laguna Woods. People don't understand, really, that for most people, unless you are a Koch brother or Mitt Romney, if you go to a nursing home, eventually that's going to be paid for by Medicaid.
So the best counter to the threats, as the threats keep coming along, is everybody understanding, that we're trying to go, what does expand mean?
Right.
We're trying to go to CPIE,
Right.
which is a much better way, a much more realistic way of calculating the CPI for older people whose basic healthcare costs, the difference between older people and the rest of the population is the healthcare costs zoom
Right.
for
The older
older
you
people.
get, that's
so
correct.
that's a fairer way. That would be an expansion. The chain CPI, which has been on the table for a while, is a cut.
Right.
Where we are right now is in the middle.
Right. So let me just ask. Let me be specific, and this will be the last question. Okay. The specific are candidates. We're here in the 45th Congressional District. If you live in the 45th Congressional District, if you live in Laguna Woods, your congresswoman is named Mimi Walters. Is Mimi Walters a supporter of, if she is a supporter, we know she's not a supporter of the Affordable Care Act because
know that for sure.
because she voted to repeal it. Is she a
did.
supporter of Medicare? Is she a supporter of Social Security?
Okay, so this is where my two, my being president of Social Security Works PAC and being Bowser kind of merge into one. Because I'm also the guy, for the younger people out there who aren't that familiar with the old Sha-Na-Na television show, we were in the movie Grease. You've probably seen the movie Grease. Mm-hmm. So Sha-Na-Na was in the movie Grease, and in the big scene at the Hop, we sang every song. I'm the guy who sang Born to Hand Jive during the dance contest between Cha-Cha Di Gregorio and Danny Zuko. So why am I bringing this up? Because I am literally the guy who said, how low can you go? They're doing the limo. How low can you go? Say it with me. How low can you go? How low can you go? I'm the guy who said that. So I'm reminded of that when I look at the Alliance for Retired Americans scorecard on senior issues, because they take 10 senior issues every year and they grade legislators on how they voted, right? So if you get all 10 right, if you voted in favor of seniors on all 10 issues, you get 100, right? So do you know what Mimi Walters' score was for 2016 and 2017?
I'm going to get 0.
A big fat 0 would be correct. And therefore I say to Congresswoman Mimi Walters, how low can you go? How low can you go? Can't go any lower than 0.
We're going to come back in just a minute. I want to ask you a couple of questions about your Bowser career, because I know I'm interested. I know everybody else is. I just want to let me close out this portion. Of Social Security and Medicare are two of the most popular social programs we've ever had in this country. And the Affordable Care Act, we thought it was unpopular, but it turns out when they tried to repeal it, we found out it was quite popular. They're popular because they're effective, and they're popular, especially Social Security and Medicare. They're popular because people understand them. You work, you reach a certain age, you're eligible for the programs. The thing we need to do, the thing us people need to do, is to elect people, especially to the Congress, United States Congress, the United States Senate, people who support Medicare, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act. That's where their fates are determined. If you live in this congressional district, the 45th in California, Mimi Walters is not a supporter of these programs, right? You will have an opportunity in November. This is before the primary. We don't know who the other candidate is going to be, but I guarantee it'll be a candidate who supports and will defend and work for Social Security and Medicare. So please vote, and vote your best interest. Don't be distracted by look what an immigrant did in San Francisco. That's not important. They're showing you that with their right hand. Their left hand is in your pocket, taking out your retirement money and taking out your medical care.
And my friend Stephen's life literally depends
absolutely,
on it.
absolutely.
And there are many people like you who have come out, all across the country. Laura Packard, our friend in Las Vegas, with stage 4 cancer.
And just 6 months ago, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer, which is a very aggressive cancer. And her insurance is, again, it's paying all of it. And we're able to pay what we can contribute. And we get our subsidies that help us out so that we get the care that we need and that it's not being squandered or get rationed in any sort of way.
Right, you're not buying potato chips.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me just ask you before they throw us out of the studio. Let me ask you as Bowser.
Okay. Do I have to talk like this then?
No, you can talk regular. Any way you want. Bowser's Doo-Wop Rock and Roll Party.
Hey,
That's what you're doing now.
Yes, we're going to talk about that in 1 second, but I'm coming back here to do the endorsement of, whichever candidate is better, and it won't be Mimi. So Social Security will endorse, and I'll do the Bowser here and come back.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
yes.
so what are you doing now? What is that about, the Bowser's Doo-Wop Rock and Roll Party?
So I'm still doing the same kind of show that I used to do with Sha Na, and it's still fun as long as I don't do it too much. I actually did the show here.
Did you really?
In the old days, a couple of times. And I'm working at Hershey Park next Sunday. I have a very schizoid life. I'm going to Hershey Park next Sunday doing 2 shows that I'm producing, and then I'll do Bowser's Rock and Roll Party there later in the year. And right after that, I'm going to Washington, D.C. with a bunch of meetings with Emily's List and
there you go.
Senatorial Campaign Committee and stuff like that. And then I'm going to do some stuff in Florida that has to do with candidates.
Well, it's probably a good thing you decided you'd retire from showbiz.
This is some retirement. I'm busier in my retirement than I ever was in my career.
Well, let me ask you too, since they haven't thrown us out yet. So where did you develop an affinity for that kind of music? When you guys first started, it wasn't at its apex of popularity.
Right, we were the revival. Sha Na was really the revival of the wonderful music of the 50s and the early 60s. And I always say in my talks about Social Security and Medicare, I said, I love the music of the 50s and the early 60s, but that doesn't mean I actually want to return to the 50s and the early 60s before there was Medicare. But musically, it was a wonderful era. And we were kind of little kids growing up with that music. We started at Columbia University in the city of New York. And it was an outgrowth of a singing group that was kind of a really square kind of singing group that stood around in a semicircle and wore blue blazers and gray slacks and was always looking for a different repertoire.
Yeah.
And somehow came up with this idea of doing 50 songs in the late 60s, which were a very turbulent time. It was during the Vietnam War. And there was an element to it of reclaiming some version of the innocence of when we were little kids, and especially when we did songs like Teen Angel and Tell Laura I Love Her. In the context of 1969, 1970, those songs seemed like they came from another planet, another lifetime.
Well, there was a psychedelic era.
We had gone through, it was a wonderful era for music because everything was going on at once. You had sort of folk rock, acid rock, country rock, soul. The 60s were very vibrant musical period, but there was something that touched our exact generation about bringing back that music that was simpler and more innocent. And it caught on, and we just kept doing it, and I'm still doing it today.
Yeah. Now, a lot of that music was pretty much centered, and the original was centered on the East Coast, wasn't it, a lot of that? I know Dion and the Belmonts, and Danny and the Juniors, they're both from New York.
Although there was a very vibrant West Coast scene.
There was, too. I was not aware of that.
It should never be underestimated. I mean, pound for pound, it's a little more East Coast music, but there were people on the West Coast. The Platters came from the West Coast, were some of the best.
Live and learn.
The Coasters were really a West Coast group. one of my favorites, he's passed on now, Cleve Duncan of the Penguins, the guy who sang Earth Angel, was out here. It was kind of a bi-coastal phenomenon, and some people in the middle too. You know, Chicago, Chuck Berry came out of Missouri.
Yep.
You know, it was a national phenomenon, but the doo-wop sound particularly, which I think Sean and I is probably best known for, was a little bit more of a New York, Philly phenomenon.
East Coast. Now, Stephen, I know you're not of the same
Yes,
generation.
his music career.
Are you familiar with, how familiar are you with doo-wop music? What do you think of doo-wop music?
Well, so my grandma, when she would pick me up from school,
Stephen, that's not what we want to hear.
Well, it's the truth. That's how I got exposed to doo-wop music is through my grandmother. She played records all the time back in when she would watch me as a little kid, and definitely was very familiar.
I'll bet you've seen the movie Grease.
Oh yes,
like
many
times.
Yeah. Well, listen, we are getting the boot. I truly wish we had another half hour. We could discuss all of these topics in greater detail. But I want to thank you both so much for being here. Not only for the information that you gave us, which is really, I can't tell you how important it is to most of the people that live here, but also for the work that you do and that you continue to do for these programs. It's just invaluable, and we greatly appreciate it. Us recipients of these programs greatly appreciate it. So I want to thank everybody for paying attention, for watching us today, and let me tell you that we will be back. We will be back before the election. John Bowser has promised to come back and
100%.
endorse the candidate that's going to be the best for Social Security and
Correct.
Medicare, and we're gonna put the lights on him again and do that. So thank you all very much. Please don't forget to vote, and please vote for your own interest. Don't be distracted. Vote for your interest, your family's interest, and your neighbor's interest. Vote for people who will protect and defend the Affordable Care Act, Social Security, and Medicare. Thank you all very much.
Alan, can I do the obligatory closing?
Go ahead.
Good night, and grease for peace.
All right.